And Top Story is brought to you by Vodafone. Together we can. My name is Ernest Menu. Now, 2 years ago, they were victims of an attack by operatives of the National Security in a by-election at the Ayawaso West Wuogon constituency. They sustained various degrees of injury, with some of them maimed for life. We understand one person has died as a result of internal bleeding caused by gunshot wounds. The Emilshot Commission, set up by government to investigate the bloody incident, recommended compensation for them. But after 2 years of repeated calls for government to implement the Commission's report, a program organized by the National Security Ministry today to present the compensation package was interrupted.
This country is for all of us. You should not be politicizing things. You understand? We should not be politicizing things. They are aware. If you ask them, they are aware. And so if you are their lawyers, fine. But don't say that we are surprised. We surprised you. We haven't surprised you. They are the people that we are dealing with. They are the people that we are dealing with. Let's take a date.
So that is the Chief Director at the Ministry of the National Security. We'll hear from him shortly. But the lawyer for the victims, Abraham Amaliba, said that the ministry had failed to engage them in the process of negotiating and computing what should go into the negotiation, the compensation package for their clients. He says they reject the compensation that has been prepared by the ministry, and here's why.
See, if you invite the individuals to come and provide some documentation, and they come and provide the documentation, and that has lasted for 2 months, that is not negotiation. In fact, if they had told them that they needed to come here with their lawyers, they would have done so by informing us. But today, they were asked to come here for a meeting, and they assumed that this is the beginning of the negotiation. Look at them. To them, and that's where the surprise element comes in. The surprise element is not because we are not saying that we are not aware of this meeting. But the understanding was that today was the beginning or the commencement of the negotiation of the compensation. So we got here and we're only told that, oh, they have compensation packages. And we thought that, no, how did they arrive at those figures? We needed to understand how they arrive at those figures and to also explain to our clients. For transparency's sake, we thought that we should hold on with this process. We'll engage them, I mean the national security people, as lawyers, after which we'll engage our clients and this meeting can come on. Like my colleague said, we are not against the compensation, but we just think that the right things should be done. We would want to bring to their attention the fact that some of them, or 2 of them, like my colleague said, are virtually vegetables now and cannot actually engage in any meaningful work to feed their family. And you can see some of them with their children here. That must be factored into the compensation package. The level of compensation will depend on the extent of damage or injury that you have sustained. So we come here and they give everybody equal amount. What are we going to say? And that's why it dawned on us to ask them to put a hold on what they are going to do. And then we'll have an engagement. If you are even going to benefit from something, it is important that you have a look into the processes leading up to the benefit that you are going to enjoy. So that's what we are just talking about. So we are not saying that probably when we have the engagement, the amount will increase or decrease. That's not what we are saying. It is just fair and proper that we as lawyers intervene to allow our clients get to know how these competitions were done, how they arrive at those levels of amounts, and then we can take it from there. Nobody is against the competition.
That is Abraham Amaliba. He's lawyer for the victims of the Ayawaso West Wuogon by-election violence. My colleague Maxwell Adobda joins me in the studio. Maxwell, you are the National Security Ministry today. This was a program that was meant to present packages to the victims, but it didn't turn out as planned because the lawyers, as we heard Amaliba there, interrupted the program, saying they did not follow due process. But tell us about how things panned out. At what point did they speak up?
Well, right from the get-go, the lawyers actually for the victims registered the objection to the whole process. In fact, just before we entered the National Security Ministry, I met one of the lawyers, lawyer Victor Dawudu, and he asked me what I was doing at the National Security Ministry, and I told him that we were coming to cover an event, and this event was about the presentation of packages to the Ayawaso West Wuogon victims. And he told me, well, they didn't know about presentation of packages, compensation packages to them, but that their clients actually told them that they've been invited to the National Security Ministry, so they were coming there to see what was happening. In fact, they were not in the know as to why they had been, invited. So we're taken to the auditorium where the event was actually supposed to take place. We had family members of the victims seated, the victims themselves, seated. And then when the chief director of the ministry came in, and then there was a preliminary remarks from the director legal of the national security. And then we had lawyer Amaliba actually rising to speak and saying that they had reservations, and that they're objecting because they did not have prior information as to what today's event was actually about. The director for legal actually told him that he should wait when they are done, then they can iron out their differences. Now, after that, then we had the chief director of the ministry actually making a speech, and then after making the speech, he actually said, okay, can we have the packages so we can... And then lawyer Amaliba actually rose and then spoke again.
So this was the second time.
This was the second
they were
time
trying to get the attention to put a hold on the program.
Exactly. And this time around, they succeeded in putting a hold, on the presentation of the compensation packages. And their main issue was that they were not, engaged as to what should go into the compensation package for the victims. But we spoke to the director of legal at the national security, Osei Dixon, who's been he says actually that the victims were engaged, and they engaged them. They told them that if they have anyone they want to bring to take part in the negotiation process, they can do that.
So the onus on you when you're invited is to communicate with your intermediaries, your lawyers and things like that. That is okay. In most cases, they came directly. Some also came accompanied by spouses and other friends and things like that. So as far as we're concerned, they always had the opportunity to engage whichever lawyer or whichever solicitor that they wanted to.
Did they present any lawyer during?
They came themselves.
They didn't present any
lawyers? No, not at all. Mainly started about like last 2 months.
Knowing well that they had lawyers.
No, we don't know.
From the start.
Listen, so that is entirely up to a person. So if you work with your FM, if you are invited by any person, we cannot pontificate for you the lawyers who should come in your representation. You can choose or decide who will represent you. You can decide to represent yourself in a matter of, even if it's a court, for example. The court, even if it knows that your father was a lawyer, will not write to your father and say, listen. That
you shouldn't deal directly with the victim.
Listen. So what we're saying is simple. They had all this. We have no difficulty with that.
So what went into the decision?
We work with the Attorney General. So there's an established mechanism. If you're dealing with several liability, those things are there. Unless I don't have it presently here with me to avert to. So they use the baseline figures.
How much do you really add?
I don't think I have the requisite authority right now to make disclosure document, so that at least if they want to see a walkthrough, that should be fine for us. So next week, if God willing, that should be fine for us. So next week, if God willing, we should have the the compensations.
If they fail to appear, what?
Stop any. If you are awarded something and you won't take it, that is not an issue. It's that seems best to you. But I think that the healthy thing is that the minister thinks that we should have a country in which whenever people have issues with the state, there's remedies available, and that we should pursue those remedies and support them to pursue those remedies. So I think that it's the aspect that I personally find quite laudable.
So that is the Director Legal at the National Security Ministry, Maxwell, explaining what had transpired between them and the victims.
Yeah.
But how much is involved?
Well, we were not told. We asked how much they are paying to the victims, but we're told that they cannot disclose the amount that they are giving to them. But we're informed about a baseline that they use in instances, like that. But the Chief Director of the Ministry, Lieutenant Colonel Abebio Siribo, said that when the monies came in, the package actually came in, they realized it wasn't, in their estimation, it wasn't big enough. So
that is after the computation.
After the computation. So the National Security Minister himself actually urged them to increase it. So they had to raise it.
Maybe we can't go into details as to the computation of the compensation, but it's based on an established procedure from Ministry of Justice, Attorney General's Department. There is a compensation package. I mean, there's a system, a way of computing the compensation. So we had it from there, and even with that, maybe I have to disclose that the Minister for National Security, Honorable Kandapa, on seeing the figures that came up, decided to beef them up. So it means that whatever that we are even paying now are more than what is expected under normal circumstances. We are here to put a finality to this Ayawaso incident that happened some years back. It has taken us some time to come to this conclusion at this time, simply because of the processes involved. It's been back and forth with the Attorney General's Department, and eventually we came up to the conclusions that we are about revealing to you. A total of 8 people, comprising 5 persons who suffered personal injury and 3 others who suffered property damage, were recommended to be compensated by the Emily Short Committee. As a result of that, the Honorable Minister for National Security, under the directive of His Excellency the President, Bernardo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, constituted a committee to liaise with the Office of the Attorney General to assess the extent of personal injury and property damage and recommend the amount to be paid to the individual. So far, 6 people have been assessed, and as such will be compensated accordingly. Efforts are, however, being made to identify the 2 others involved. So 6 that have been identified.
So that is the Chief Director at the National Security Ministry, Lieutenant Colonel Abebio Serbo, retired. Let's go to the phone lines now. We're joined by Abraham Maliba, who is lawyer for the victims in that gruesome, in that violent election that characterized the Ayawaso West Wuogon by-elections. Mr. Maliba, I'm grateful for your time here on Top Story. You did hear the Director of Legal at the National Security, Osei Dixon, say that they started engaging them 2 months ago. Were you in the know?
Good evening to your listeners. 2 months ago, what we know was that they invited our clients to produce medical bills and other documents supporting their claims. Now, other invitations we were not aware of. And so when this invitation came last week to our clients, they then informed us of this meeting today. We found out from them what this invitation is about. What they simply told us was that it is a meeting with the national security. We get to the national security and we are being told that they are bringing closure to the Ayawaso West Wuogon shooting incident, and they are ready to give them compensation packages. That is where I said that is not fair, because we need to know how they came to that level of compensation, even though they didn't even tell us how much it was. What went into deciding that Mr. A should receive this amount and Mr. B should receive that amount? We need to understand. And if we understand as lawyers, we'll be able to explain to our clients. Because as it is now, both lawyers and clients are at sea, and we don't know what this whole compensation package is about. And so we told them to pull the brakes.
Yes.
And so that is the situation. There were no negotiations. The earlier invitations were for them to produce documents supporting their claims or their injury, and that they were actually injured and they went to hospital, that is not negotiation for us.
But following what happened today, following what you discovered today, have you engaged your clients to find out if there were subsequent meetings beyond the initial one 2 months ago?
I'm just telling you what my clients told me and my colleague Adawudu, that they were only invited. What the director of legal is saying, that there were negotiations, were actually invitations to our clients to produce documents.
And this was a
Medical
one-time
bill.
meeting.
That is not a negotiation.
And they
That's not
met just
negotiation.
once, just for clarity.
Oh no, they had to go there on 2 or 3 occasions because some couldn't produce them immediately. Some had to go there with one. Then the other time they went with another one. And so the 2 months that the director is talking about is all to gather this information that they needed. But that was not negotiation.
But you heard him also say that they had an option to provide, I mean, to come along with legal representation or not. And so if they decided not to do that, that was their option.
There was no negotiation, so we wouldn't have been in a position to know whether they went there with lawyers or not. From our point of view, what we know is that produce documents, produce evidence, produce your hospital bills, produce your whatever. Those are and that is just to go and deliver documents and move away. That's not negotiation. That's what I'm saying.
So what was your expectation? What should have happened as far as these procedures are concerned?
That because this is a national issue, attention is on these matters, you would also agree that because it is also a recommendation from the Emil Short Commission, it is important that if there's any compensation package, the victims must have an input into it. For instance, one of them can no longer use his leg again. There's one who is virtually like a vegetable because following the incident, he's gotten a stroke. And so when we got there, we had to virtually carry him on our back. And so have they factored in all this? These are relevant questions to be asked. And so if you don't have further engagement, and if there was no platform to engage, to then come to the conclusion that the compensation levels are agreeable, why would we just go today and just receive an envelope and walk away? That doesn't make sense.
Now, you're saying that they did not disclose to you how much was involved. If you knew how much and you came to the conclusion that this was good enough, would that have solved the situation for you?
In fact, if you listen to my interview, our intervention is not to determine whether what they were given to us is adequate or inadequate. Our intervention is to ensure that there's transparency, there's fairness, and that the victims would eventually receive justice. So this intervention is to ensure that when the engagement process starts, and that's next week Wednesday, we'll meet them. We just want to know how they computed those levels of compensation and whether, in our view, they took into consideration the extent of damage caused to our clients. That's all.
Mr. Maliba, please hold the line for me. We're joined by another private legal practitioner, Martin Kpebu. Mr. Kpebu, I'm grateful for your time here on Top Story. You heard the director of legal say that there are standard procedures, there are mechanisms involved, and in fact, they have been in touch with the Office of the Attorney General. Surprised at at the turn of events?
Well, yeah, as for a surprise, maybe I'm not exactly sure. But let's put it this way. Once he has accepted that, look, they are open to do it all over again, I want to look at it from that direction. Okay? Yes, let's be constructive. At least he's seen that they've not done it well. And so now that the lawyers have come in, they want to do it afresh. Because, Ernest, what it is that, like as Mr. Amaba was saying, there are what we call heads of this compensation, how the compensation is calculated. So you heard the national security lawyer mention that Mr. Dixon Osebunsu, okay, he mentioned that they have a formula from the AG. I haven't seen it, but I presume it will tally with what is done in court. So as lawyers, we have the negligent cases taught, okay? So assault, battery, and the rest. So there's a formula. They will tell you pain and suffering, okay? Loss of amenities. So now that you have the disability, how are you coping and all that? Because I remember one of the persons there, I think the one Mr. Malba is saying he has lost use of his leg and the rest. At a point in time, there was media coverage that John Mahama was the one paying the medical bills and all that. So now, if it's time for compensation, it means they have to tender all these bills and be paid for that. That is separate. You see, so that's special damages once they've suffered. So any money you spend, so all the time. So let's say if the person is undergoing physiotherapy now, each time you go to the physiotherapist, the bills and also the taxi in and out, you see the transport and all that. So it's clear that you cannot come to a conclusion about compensation if each person has not been given an opportunity to state his expenses and all that. So, but it's good that Mr. Sebunsu has readily accepted that they are willing to do it all over again. So that's a good step forward, and that's what has to be done.
Assuming they did all of that without legal representation, would that be enough?
No, it wouldn't be. But even on the facts of this case, it's clear that that's not what was done. Because from what he said, he hasn't alluded to that.
Yes.
So now that the lawyers have come in, then they will gather the bills and then they will look at the pain and suffering and all that. And then they will make an argument. Because these are lay persons and this is a technical area. It's technical. So it's inconceivable that these lay persons were going to be able to negotiate with the national security people that, for pain and suffering, I'm entitled to 500,000. For loss of amenities, I'm entitled to X amount, and all that, the special damages and all that. No.
Mr. Tuba, I'm grateful that you could join us. We still have on the line Abraham Amaliba, who is lawyer for the victims in that by-election violence. So, Mr. Amaliba, what happens? You're meeting them next week, and you're going to begin the negotiations all over?
So we've scheduled a meeting for next week, Wednesday, to meet with national security. Unfortunately, the Attorney General was not even in this meeting, even though we are told that the computations were done in the Attorney General's office. His representative was not there. So I hope that next week we'll have the Attorney General's representative or he himself in there, and then they can take us through. We'll also ask relevant questions and then see how we can factor in some of the liabilities that they are carrying now as victims. So next week, Wednesday, we'll meet them and then we'll see the way forward.
Do you expect that this will be dealt with expeditiously, seeing that some of the victims are still suffering?
Oh, yes. That's why I indicated clearly in my interview with your reporters that we are not against the compensation. This is not going to be unduly long. That's why we quickly took a short date, which is just next week. And it's not even next week Friday again. It's next week Wednesday, and that's why we know that our clients are suffering. So we wouldn't want to prolong all these processes.
Thank you very much. That's Abraham Amaliba, lawyer for the victims of the Ayawaso West Ogun by-election violence, whose compensation package was prepared today by the National Security Ministry, but that was not presented to them because lawyers rejected to the offer being made on grounds that due process was not followed. We spoke to some of them who were present at that meeting.
Everybody know what happened on that day. I'm an NDC man, so I went there to work as an observer. Before we saw some people wearing masks, then things, they just came to us. They say we should leave. We say why? So they say we should leave. We say we don't know why we should leave. We are here to work for our party. Before we saw, they start shooting. They start shooting on the air. Before we saw straight bullet, they start shooting us. Before I see myself, I was on the ground. So I woke up, I just fell down. I woke up, I think about 4 times. I fell down. Before I see, my leg is angry, it's shaking. Then I called one of my brothers to help me. Before I saw myself, I was in the 37. I cannot play football. I cannot do anything. You can see my leg. The leg has spoiled. There is no bone inside my leg. As I'm speaking to you, there is no bone. I'm still under treatment. I cannot do anything for the leg. You can see the leg. He affected my leg badly. I cannot do anything. Getting to 3 years, I'm just inside the room. I cannot do anything by the help of NDC and my families. They are those feeding me. I always say I'm very grateful to meet Arukost, our former president, John Dramani Mahama. He was the one who was helping me with my family. If I didn't meet this kind of men with good hearts, like by now I don't know whether maybe I'm on the road begging, because I cannot do anything, honestly speaking. I cannot do anything with the leg. Yes, so he has affected me badly.
And that is a victim of the Ayawaso West Ogun by-election violence, speaking there to my colleague Maxwell Adbaba. That's it for Top Story, brought to you by Vodafone. Together we can. Up next is Ghana Connect with Evans Mensah. Stay tuned in.